Well, hello. So I'm gonna go through how I did my remix of Kaden Cashmere's cover of Valerie. And we're gonna start with the drums. This is an older session where I still have the MIDI split up. Originally, this was all programmed using one track because this is a kit. I think this is one of the stock kits in Ableton, depending on version, I think. So I started building with this, and I started in the chorus when I programmed the drums, and from there I thinned it down when I got into the verses. So I removed the main kick in the verse parts and also added a few effects and slams and things like that on top of the kit to get a bit more interesting things happening in the layout. But the basic rhythm, I'm gonna solo the drums. Don't listen to this is unmixed. This session crashed, so I saved it as a new one to be on the safe side. So this is all the programmed part for the drums. And then in the last chorus, I added 2 loops. This one is edited quite a bit after I imported it. So if we loop this selection, now I can hear my computer start revving up, since it's both doing the capture and running the DAW. And if we solo the individual parts, we have them. I'm playing this with different length notes, so I get a different decay on every other downbeat. Yeah, and then I have the second kick that's just. And this is an ugly one. They are also distorted on the drum bus using the Waves Berserk plugin. Then I have a really thin, mean. And as you can tell, it's lagging quite a bit right now. So this thin, rather mean with a lot of low end here. I've cut that out in the mix session. And here we have the claps. Oh. Quite a nice. No idea what that comes from, but sounds good. Then I have 2 closed hi-hats playing off each other. This is the first one. And then I added a triplet pattern behind it. And together they create quite an interesting. Sorry, no, not a triplet pattern. Sorry, it's a dotted 8 note. This one is playing. Too low, not loud enough with the fans running from my computer. Together that, and then I have some reverse noise type sound here that was in the kick, so I used it. Most people who have heard my productions know I like that kind of thing. And this is some blippy percussion loop. And then I've changed this around. They're not playing in their original sequence. I moved the one a bit so it played better with what I got going here. So that's the MIDI for the drums. And then in this session we're also going to have a look at the piano. So if we go back to the start. So I have the main verse piano part here. This was played in, so I got a bit of variation on them, and they're not very tight. But it means, yeah, it's something happening with the velocities and makes it a bit more interesting, at least to my ears. It's an extremely simple backing track. It was a bit more, had more flourish in the start, but when I added the thing that really made me, inspired me in this remix, this plugin, which creates all the wow and flutter. We raise the volume there so we can. So if I remove this plugin, it becomes something completely different. And you can hear some note of noises and things like that. This compresses it quite hard. It's some emulation of one of the Dolby compressions or noise reduction, but yeah, it works as a compressor. There's some saturation, there's wow flutter, there are dropouts. Pushed it toward as dirty as I felt it needed, and then there's some EQ going on, because in this piano there's a lot of low end in the sample for some reason that the plugin even brings out higher. So I cut that away. And I cut it at about 160. That's not mostly pedal noise and stuff like that below there. So that's the first part of this. Now we're going to jump to my other session and we're going to start going through the parts in that one. So now we're back in the mix session. This session is quite a bit more heavy. I'm going to remove this for now. So here we have the drums rendered as audio in the session. I'm going to make a loop selection of this. After the after Feedback Friday, I've worked on the mix a bit because it wasn't up to snuff then. The danger of going through working for a whole Saturday on the production and then mixing it directly after. I've changed the tuning of the kick slightly here from the other one. So if we listen to the drums now, we hear nothing because I have the wrong output selected. Now we can hear the fan starting up again. We can turn off the audio when we don't need it. So it's the same elements. I've just rendered it down, applied some processing, some EQ, where I felt it was needed. And then it gets sent into the drum bus where I have some berserk distortion going on. A bit more EQ. I'm apparently chopping off everything below 30 Hz quite harshly. There was a lot of boominess down there. Some API 2500 compression. And quite typical. Long attack, fast release, 4:1 ratio, and I probably have about 3-4 dB of compression going on. Classic drum bus compression. And then I'm dealing with transients using the K-clip. We can check what that's doing. I think I'm clipping the transients quite hard. Yeah. Can move it. Here we have. I don't think the clipping is extremely audible. Just keeps the transients in check so I can get level the mix stage. And then the piano here is rendered to audio and using the same plugins as we saw in the last session. The bass, I've chopped that up quite hard. I've copied parts around and modified it. Move to the start here. So if we solo that. There are fades going on in and out, short ones just to not get too obvious harsh clicks. The DI alone sounds that's mostly what we hear. And I'm adding some dirt and grit using the amp track. We're still looking at this is the... And most of the processing to get the sound I wanted is done on the bass bus, so where they are bussed together. And I'm using a bit reduction and some erosion, they call it. It's some sort of noise distortion plugin. So if you remove those, the sound of the bass changes extremely much. Now it sounds like an instrument. And if I add the bit reduction, we get some gritty, nice digital sound to it. So if we compare. Added some downsample aliasing we can hear. And then we have this. That's a bit more of dirt. Then there's a pretty standard. I'm using a multiband to control certain frequency parts of the just to keep it more in line, because Warren's playing wasn't really meant to do this pattern that I've cut it up to, so I have to control some of his articulations so to get it more in line with how I thought this part should sound. And then I have another one. This band is sidechained to the kick, so it moves out of the way when the kick hits in the low end, and this is just to remove clicks from the strings. It's extremely aggressive and fast. So if we remove this band, I've cut out most of them, but it just softens it a little bit. And then I have a limiter cutting off just the peaks that escapes through my compression that has a 10 millisecond attack on same compression. Here it's 30 milliseconds and here it's 10. And I'm doing some EQ to it to control the low end a bit. So this is cut up and copied. When I've rendered this, you have gotten this rendered. I've also used the groove function in Ableton, so we can see these markers here. They are transient markers. So the groove function, the quantize audio function will move this to the it will quantize the audio. So, since it wasn't played in this groove, I needed to force it to conform to that. So if we just solo the drums and the bass, we get about when I got here, I started to work. I've already added the piano. I started with the drums, then the piano, and then I started working on the bass. After this, I went for this pad sound I got here, which is a very thin, ethereal. It just adds texture to. So if we play that, the bass and the bass and the drums. And after I've done that, I started to work on the guitars, and I decided I wanted to chop them up. These two are the same. This is just with the effects rendered. I'm doing this because I wanted the guitars to switch the side on the last strum, just because I thought that might be funny. It isn't actually that audible in the mix, but. So I cut it down, decided what parts I liked and how they interacted with the vocal and things like that. Used that as a basis. So I started with letting the electric guitar come in the build to the chorus proper. And without the vocal, it sounds extremely weird. But with the vocal, it makes sense. So when I got them about here, I decided to go back and work on the verse. Because I've learned from doing my Elena Blair remix, you have to start in the chorus, otherwise that part's gonna fall flat. So get a chorus you like, and then work from there. So in the verses, I had my piano that I've already added. I played that throughout how I wanted to hear it against the vocal. So then I started to dress the verse a little bit. So I started to add these strings, which are just strings, chord stabs. Play these in as well, so there's a bit, but these I quantized because I wanted to have them really machine-like. Just because I had them looser first, I didn't like that. It needed to sound a bit wrong, or yeah. So I quantized them hard. But the good thing with playing them in is that they don't sound exactly the same, all of them, because I'm hitting the notes slightly with different velocities. So sometimes one tone in the chord is a bit stronger than the other, and things like that. Then they are EQ'd, compressed to be audible and not too stabby or have too much attack, because it's a pizzicato string sample. But to just increase the decay of them a little bit, I compress them quite hard. No, not that hard. But and then I added a lot of dirt using an 8-bit effect machines. That's an emulation of a hardware device from Auto Machines, which makes excellent hardware devices. I have a reverb of theirs that sounds extremely good. And this is what adds the graininess of the strings. So if we solo just the strings, there's a huge difference. And if we just solo this part, they are extremely dirty. Or dirty, they are destroyed. But together, it just adds a nice feeling of something being off. And I felt that this was texture enough. With the wobbly piano, the bass, the kick and the snare. And there we heard the snare verb. I have a reverb that I've rendered, and so I could control the decay using a clip length and fades. So if we solo the drums, play from a little bit ahead here. Just to add a bit of interest and texture to the part. And that comes, and it's longer sometimes, and yeah, just decisions that happens while I work through it. And I have this reverse noise that builds into the next, which we're coming to now. My computer is extremely laggy right now. I like these transition elements. I don't know why, they just, yeah, they work for me. So going from this part. And I think of all the things, what you're doing, and in my head I paint a picture. 'Cause since I've come on home, well, my body's been a mess, and I've missed your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over? So in this part, I've added a few low strings. And we have this pad that plays a pads follows the chords pretty much, and the strings just play the low octave of the chord or the root note. The strings are all from Roland's SRX expansion cards from the 90s and 2000s. And I didn't want to use too good strings because I wanted it to sound more cheesy pop than excellently produced orchestral or movie music. I wanted the strings to be a bit unnatural to get the feel I was after. Here I also have this is the same pad as the chorus pad, just reversed and faded to lead into the chorus proper. And this is widened quite a bit. So if we listen to the string parts from there. Just adds a little bit of build there. Then in the chorus, the last thing I added in this production was adding some synths, arpeggios, to sprinkle some cheese over the chorus. We're gonna go to the last one because here all of them are in the rendered file I'm gonna send you. All of them will be included on all. You can decide for yourself where you use them, or you can just use the multi-tracks to look around yourself how I put this together. The first part is a noisy type arpeggiator. I'm using this to just create some movement. It's auto-panned between left and right at the rate of 1 revolution per bar. It's not that audible, so if we remove these and listen to the chorus, you can just hear it popping out on the left or right side here and there, depending on. It's mostly a rhythmic instrument more than a note tone instrument, but it adds a bit of harmonic content to the song all the same. Then I have a much more tone-based arpeggiator. I played slightly different chords into these, or not chords, the same chords, but slightly different inversions and things like that, and amounts of notes, depending on what figure I wanted the arpeggio to create. Here I found that I needed to have a dynamic high band because I wanted to boost highs, but when it gets to the high notes, it got really piercing. So then I'm using the UAD distressor to squash it together completely. Just how I liked it. Then it's sidechained to the vocal. So when the vocal comes in, we can see that here in the gain reduction. So it comes up and replaces the vocal when it's not there. They are in the same sort of frequency region, so they were fighting. So that was an easy solution. It also gave the chorus a more dynamic feel because there's a call and response type thing going on between the vocal and that one. And then there's some effects, some echo, a Valhalla room, reverb, and a chorus. So if we listen to just the effects on this. So the effects are what creates the stereo movement. It's quite mono, even though it's a stereo file. I think I rendered this for the uploadable multi-tracks as a stereo file because I didn't know if the sound was stereo in any way, but I had it as stereo, so I did like that. So together, yeah, this effect adds a bit of stereo movement. If we mute it, yeah, it's in the center completely. And then I have, I'm calling this the fake wide arpeggios. You're gonna only have one because they are duplicates of each other. I've delayed 1/14 and they are here panned and throwing an echo to the other side and vice versa here. Using the Mac DSP compressor bank here, trying that out. It worked well. So if we solo the fake wides, these are just ear candy on either side, and I did this panning and delay, track delay trick just to make them fit in the mix. So now they're outside of everything else. Because they're in the same region as the guitars, but I wanted something really quite super cheesy going on here because the verses are so dark and brooding. I needed the chorus and especially the final chorus to be really cheesy and have a nice pop vibe. So this was my solution for that. I think it worked quite well. And then we come down to the vocals. It's so I'm so unused to working with such a small window as I need to do when recording the stream. I think we can take from the last chorus, second to last chorus until the end. We can look at that part. Here I have the main vocal. On these tracks, I had a Melodyne on here from the start, trying to fix some of the timing issues that I had with the vocal to my track. I gave that up because when I got it so she felt completely in time with, or completely, but close enough to in time with the music, she started sounding robotic, so I just decided to not do it. She's slightly fixed. I'm using the groove quantization, the same as I have on the bass and the drums. Ableton does a little bit of it for me. I decreased the amount it does to about 50%, but she's a little bit closer. That actually worked better than the 2 hours I spent trying to fit her in. Sometimes the easy way in is the good one. But then I kept running out of single channel CPU power because Ableton, as does most DAWs that use native processing, each channel has to run on one core. So if you have a huge amount of plugins on one channel, you can run out of processing, even though it's not actually using maybe rest of the chorus are at 10 or 15%, but one channel is stopping complete playback. In Ableton, the quick fix is to just send this channel to another channel, and then the CPU load is split between them. And with Melodyne running here, it got quite heavy. So I moved the processing up here. Got a 1073, adding a bit more of a color. And then some EQ, a bit of a cut around 4 kHz and a low pass before I'm hitting a UAD LA2A. So if we solo this one.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water.
I also have a feeling she was quite compressed going in. With the LA2A, I'm only touching the vocal slightly, and I'm doing a bit more with this one.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water.
Because I wanted a quicker compression than the LA2A, so I used the 1176 as the main compressor. Then I have my usual fare of processing on the using the FF Saturn in parallel to add a bit of grit.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water.
100% works well in the verses, but
and I think of all the things
it gets a bit too aggressive in the choruses. Then I have Wave Sibilance doing the
Well,
assing.
sometimes I go out by myself.
And then I got RDS doing a bit more.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look.
And then I have a Q3 shaping the vocal sound.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water.
Also keeping the high range in check using a dynamic band at around 9 kHz.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water.
And then I have a Paltec adding quite a bit of air on top of it.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself.
Adding back a bit that the DSs and the Q3 removes. And the Paltec, UAD Paltec emulation has a really nice sound to it. And then I've added some effects here, as I usually do to vocals. I got this one, which is a delay channel. This is, I rendered the processed vocal, moved it down, cut it up, used that rendered version for some harmonies I created here. Gonna look at those, and for the reversed reverb, where I added a reverb, rendered it again, and then reversed. And I selected which syllables. So if we check this reverse reverb, right now there's an LFO tool doing a pulsing, gating motion. So if we disable these plugins and just listen to the reversed reverb clean, you can hear that I just cut out a small syllable and put the reverb for that. So it's just an so I don't have any articulations in the rising reverb. Then I have this delay that's doing a similar trick. So if we disable all the plugins here and just listen to the audio. So that's all that I kept there. And then I got a quarter note reverb here, low cutting it a little bit, and then I have this fantastic delay plugin, and together they make this. And after the delays, I wind it in it to full to have it get out of the way of the next vocal line and other effects going on. So all together, the verse vocal sounds like.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water. And I think of all the things, what you're doing, and in my head I paint a picture. 'Cause since I've come on home, well, my body's been.
And now we got to the harmonies. This is the main vocals, just rendered. I got waves tune here because I wanted to tune the harmonies harder than the lead vocal, just so they don't sound completely in sync with each other, and also get them a little more weird. Alone, these sound horrible.
Since I've come on home, well, my body's been a mess, and I've missed your ginger hair and the way you like to dress.
The crossfades between different pitched parts really messes up the waves tuner, but oh well, it works. And I'm changing the amount they are pitched depending on if it's a minor or major chord for this one. And this one is always the tune -5 because that works in both of them. It creates a weird harmony, which was, yeah, I was going for something slightly Billie Eilish.
'Cause since I've come on home, well, my body's been a mess, and I've missed your ginger hair and the way you like to dress.
So I didn't want it to sound like angels singing or something like that. I willfully went for quite a weird sound on them, which I think fit the arrangement quite well. Can play it from there in context.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water, and I think of all the things what you're doing, and in my head I paint a picture. 'Cause since I've come on home, well, my body's been a mess, and I've missed your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over, Valerie?
And then we have the original background vocals. I've used my standard basic rack with a de-esser, some EQ, quite a drastic cut around there. Use the big stereo version. This is also widened. So I'm using the mode 2 that doesn't create phase issues. It doesn't get as wide as if you didn't care about that, but I just wanted it spread out a little bit more. So to me they sound like they're ever so slightly outside and below the lead vocal. At least that was the effect I was going for. And then everything gets sent into my bussing system, which is a music bus and a vocal bus that I've stolen from Eric Valentine. That's probably stolen it from hundreds others. There's nothing new, or I just saw him explain it, and I like the setup because it gives me a workflow that works for me. So all the buses are sent to each main bus, and then they are bussed together in the master bus. And I'm doing my usual boosting and attenuating a bit around 60 Hz. I'm boosting a bit the top end using the UAD Fairchild. Gluing the music parts together, and I'm using the UAD MPEG simulation to get a bit of tape compression on it. And I have the same processing, so I get the same sort of glue color on the vocal, but since I'm not sending the vocal here, I can compress that. Can also avoid pumping from this. And then after those buses, it gets sent to my master bus, where I just have the Ableton glue compressor, which is basically the SSL bus compressor. Doing very minute amount of compression. So I've exported all my multi-tracks. They should be available for download close to this video on the site. I've exported the piano as a dirty version and as a clean version. And just if you want to add your own processing to the raw sound, you can do that. I've also exported some of the vocal effects. You can, if you want to make your own, throw them away. It would be wonderful if someone want to remix or maybe add even more to this version or here in this mixed version. I really like the groove that came out of this, so I'm gonna end on that.